Planting a pear tree seems super simple, but getting it right from the very beginning, that's the difference between a tree that just kind of struggles along and one that gives you amazing, delicious fruit for years and years to come. So in this explainer, we're going to cover the 3 big secrets to success, starting with just getting that tree in the ground.
I mean, have you ever dreamed of walking into your own backyard and picking a perfect, juicy pear right off the branch? If so, you are in exactly the right place. That dream, well, it all starts with a few key decisions, and getting them right from day one is everything. Okay, before you even think about grabbing a shovel, we need to talk about location, location, location. Seriously, picking the right spot for your pear tree is probably the single most important decision you're going to make for its entire life. If you get this part right, you've already won half the battle.
So what's on a pear tree's wish list? Well, a few things are absolutely non-negotiable. It has to have full sun. It needs well-drained soil because pear trees absolutely hate having wet feet. And it wants a soil pH that's just a little bit acidic to neutral. But here's the one that catches people off guard. You have to avoid frost pockets. Just picture the low spots in your yard where cold air pools and settles. One bad spring frost in that spot can totally zap every single blossom on your tree. And no blossoms means no fruit for the whole year.
And when we say full sun, we're not messing around. We are talking about a serious commitment here, a bare minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct, unfiltered sunlight hitting that tree every single day. The easiest way to think about it is this. Sunlight is the fuel that makes fruit. Less sun equals less energy, and that means you're going to get fewer pears or maybe none at all.
All right, so once you've scouted out that perfect sunny location, it's finally time to get your hands dirty. How you physically plant the tree is just as important as where you plant it. This step right here determines how fast it's going to establish a really strong root system.
The process itself is pretty straightforward, but oh man, the details matter. First, you're going to dig a hole that's wide, but shallow, about 2 to 3 times wider than the root ball, but no deeper. This is key because it encourages the roots to spread out. Next, you'll position the tree, and we'll talk about that crucial graft union in just a sec. Then you backfill, but only with the original soil you just dug out. And finally, give it a really good, deep watering to get rid of any air pockets and help the soil settle in nice and snug around the roots.
Now, here's a piece of advice that is going to feel wrong. It's going to go against your instincts as a gardener, but you got to trust me on this. Do not add fertilizer or compost or anything else to the planting hole. I know, it's counterintuitive, but if you create this little luxury apartment of rich soil, the roots will get lazy. They'll just hang out in that comfy spot, and they won't want to venture out into the tougher native soil to build a strong, wide foundation for the tree.
Okay, let's zoom in on a super critical checkpoint, the graft union. You'll see it on the lower trunk of your tree. It looks like a little bump or a swollen spot. This little scar is so important. It's where the tasty fruit variety was attached or grafted onto a specific rootstock that controls how big the tree gets. If you bury that union, the top part can actually grow its own roots, completely ignoring the rootstock's stay small instructions. And just like that, the dwarf tree you paid for is on its way to becoming a full-sized 30-foot monster.
So your tree is in the ground, it's happy, but that doesn't mean you're automatically going to get fruit. Not yet. Now we have to solve the pollination puzzle. And for pretty much every pear tree out there, this means your tree is going to need a friend. The big concept we need to get our heads around here is called cross-pollination. And really, it's exactly what it sounds like. For a pear blossom to actually turn into a piece of fruit, it has to get pollen from a different but compatible variety of pear tree that's blooming at the same time. Think of it like a matchmaking service for your trees. So why is that matchmaking so critical? Well, it's because the overwhelming majority of pear trees are self-unfruitful, which is a fancy way of saying they absolutely cannot pollinate themselves. While there are a few very rare self-fruitful types out there, the rule for almost every single home gardener is simple. If you want pears, you have to plant at least 2 different varieties that can pollinate each other. And just to make things a little bit trickier, pear blossoms aren't exactly the life of the party for pollinators. They make tiny amounts of nectar, and the nectar they do have is really low in sugar. This means bees and other insects find them way less exciting than, say, an apple blossom. The bottom line? You need a whole lot of pollinator activity and a compatible partner tree really close by to make sure you get a good crop of fruit. Whew, okay, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's just do a quick recap of those 3 fundamental things you need to do to get your pear tree started off right.
Here it is, your simple 3-point checklist for success.
1. Find that perfect sunny spot, 6 to 8 hours of sun minimum. 2. Get the planting depth right, and always keep that graft union up above the soil. And 3. Give your tree a friend. Plant a different compatible pear variety nearby to make sure pollination happens. If you nail these 3 things, you are well on your way. So you've done all that. The site is perfect, the tree is planted correctly, and it's got a pollination partner all lined up. Your journey has officially begun, but it is far from over. So the big question is, what comes next? We're going to tackle exactly that in part 2, where we'll cover the essentials of watering, the right way to fertilize, and the basics of pruning to build a strong, productive tree. Hey, thanks for watching this explainer. If you learned something new, go ahead and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Hey everyone, and welcome. You know, there is absolutely nothing like the feeling of harvesting fruit from a tree that you've cared for yourself. So today, we're going to break down exactly how you can get that perfect pear harvest. Let's jump right in. I mean, come on, that's the dream, right? Biting into that crisp, sweet, juicy pear that you grew in your own backyard. It's why we do this. And you know what? The good news is, making that happen is probably a whole lot easier than you think. In fact, we can really boil it all down to just 3 simple pillars of care. Think of these as the foundation for a super healthy, super productive tree. And if you get these 3 things right, trust me, you are well on your way to an amazing harvest. All right, so let's start with pillar number 1, the absolute most fundamental thing of all. Water. You gotta get the hydration right. This is the bedrock of your tree's health, especially during that growing season, when it's just working its hardest to grow leaves, branches, and, yep, your pears. So, what's the magic number? It's actually super simple. 1 inch. That's it. During the growing season, your pear tree just needs about 1 inch of water a week. Now that can come from rain or it can come from you, but it's a really easy rule to remember, and it takes all the guesswork out of watering. Okay, let's move on to our second pillar, which really builds on that first one. We're talking about mulch. But I want you to stop thinking of it as just another garden chore and start thinking of it more like a cozy, protective blanket for your tree's roots. Now, how you do this is really important. There are 2 critical steps. First, go ahead and apply a nice 2 to 3 inch layer. That's going to hold moisture in the soil and keep the weeds down. But, and this is just as crucial, you have to keep that mulch a few inches away from the actual trunk. This little gap prevents bark rot. And, get this, it takes away a favorite hiding spot for pests like voles that love to chew on the tree. Right, on to our third and final pillar. We need to talk about fertilizer, about feeding your tree. But with pears, it's less about feeding and a lot more about walking a very, very careful tightrope, especially when it comes to one nutrient in particular, nitrogen. And this is so important. I'm just going to read this quote directly from our source material. It is absolutely critical that you avoid over-fertilizing established pear trees. Let that sink in for a second. It's not just a suggestion, it's a serious warning. It feels kind of weird, right? Like, don't we want to feed our trees to help them grow? Well, with pears, too much of a good thing can be an absolute disaster. So why? Why is it so critical? Because too much nitrogen creates all this weak, lush new growth that makes the tree a perfect target for a really nasty bacterial disease called fire blight. And you'll know it if you see it. Believe me, the branches literally turn black, they wither, and they curl over into this very distinct shepherd's crook shape. It is devastating. It can take out your entire tree. So how can you tell if you're walking that tightrope or about to fall off? It's actually easy. You just have to measure. Go outside and look at the new growth on the tips of the branches from this year. If your tree is putting on less than 12 inches of new growth a year, it might need a little bit of fertilizer. But if it's growing more than 12 inches in a single year, that's the danger zone. Do not, under any circumstances, apply nitrogen fertilizer. You just have to let the tree tell you what it needs. Okay, so now that we've gone through our 3 pillars, let's pull everything together into one simple, easy-to-use checklist for your own trees. Here it is, nice and simple. 1 inch of water every week, a 2 to 3 inch blanket of mulch, but make sure to pull it back from the trunk. And most importantly, you have to walk that nitrogen tightrope. Just avoid those high nitrogen fertilizers, and if you see more than a foot of new growth, just step away from the fertilizer bag. It honestly is that simple. By just focusing on these 3 pillars, hydration, protection, and really careful feeding, you're setting your tree up for success. You're giving yourself the best possible shot at that delicious, bountiful harvest you've been dreaming about. And that's all for this explainer. I really hope this was helpful. If it was, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more guides just like this one. Thanks for watching and happy growing!
All right, today we're going to talk about transforming that pear tree in your backyard. We're going to move way beyond just planting it and hoping for the best. We're talking about actively sculpting a healthy, productive tree that's going to reward you for years and years. So, you ready to get started? Let's dive in. So, does this look a little familiar? You've got a pear tree that's just shooting for the sky, tons of leaves, tons of branches, but when it's actually time to harvest some fruit, it's a little underwhelming. It's frustrating, I get it, but the good news is this is a super common problem and it is totally fixable.
In the fix is a really simple 3-part plan. We're going to cover how to train your tree for strength, how to prune it for health and airflow, and then how to thin the fruit to get that perfect harvest. Think of it as our blueprint for pear tree success.
But before we start bending branches or making any cuts, we really have to understand the why behind all this. You know, we need to get inside the mind of a pear tree, so to speak. We need to know what it wants to do naturally, so we can work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. Okay, so here's the number one issue with pears. If you just leave them alone, they want to grow straight up. They put out all this energy into making these narrow, upright branches that have really weak connections to the trunk. And get this, that upright growth is basically the tree's signal to make more wood, not more fruit. And we're about to change that.
So what are we aiming for? It's this, the classic Christmas tree shape. The official name for it is a central leader system, and it is absolutely the key to a strong, balanced, and super productive pear tree. This shape lets sunlight and air get to literally every part of the tree.
And that brings us right to our first action, training. This is all about building that foundation. I'm telling you, getting the shape right when the tree is young is probably the single most important thing you can do to set it up for a long and fruitful life.
Let's break down that Christmas tree idea a little more. You have one main dominant trunk going straight up the middle. That's your leader. Then, coming off that leader, you have your main branches, which we call scaffolds. And the whole goal is to space these scaffolds out and set them at just the right angle to create that strong, cone-like shape.
Now, if there's one number I want you to remember from this entire explainer, it is this one, 60 degrees. That is the magic angle for a scaffold branch. See, an angle that wide creates an incredibly strong connection with the trunk. But more importantly, it literally flips a switch in the branch's hormones, telling it to stop growing wood and start making fruit.
So how do you actually get that 60-degree angle?
Well, it's pretty simple.
First, you pick out the branches you want to be your main scaffolds. Then, while they're still young and flexible, you just gently bend them down. You can use little tools called limb spreaders, or honestly, just tie them down with some string to a stake in the ground. You can even hang little weights on them until that angle sets.
All right, next up is our second big action, pruning. This is all about maintenance, but it's not just one thing. There are actually 2 different kinds of pruning you'll do at different times of the year, and each one has a totally different goal.
And this lays it out perfectly. Dormant pruning, which you do in late winter or early spring, that's your big structural work. That's when you're really shaping the tree. Summer pruning, on the other hand, is just a light tidying up, kind of like a quick haircut. You're just getting rid of those wild vertical shoots, we call them water sprouts, that try to ruin that nice shape you've created.
So, when you head out there in late winter with your pruners, here's your checklist. First, anything that's dead, damaged, or looks diseased, gone. That's just good tree hygiene. Next, look for any branches that are crossing over each other or rubbing. You got to remove one of them. And finally, cut out any other big branches that are trying to grow straight up and compete with your main central leader.
Okay, on to our final step, and I know this one is going to feel wrong. It's called thinning. You're literally going to be pulling perfectly good baby pears off the tree. But you have to trust me on this. This is the secret weapon to getting huge, delicious pears every single year.
Okay, so listen up, because this is why it's so important. Thinning does 3 critical things. 1, it forces all the tree's energy into the few pears you leave behind, so they get way bigger. 2, it keeps the branches from getting so overloaded with fruit that they snap. And 3, this is the big one, it makes sure the tree has enough energy left over to make flower buds for next year's crop. It's a total win-win-win.
And the rule for this could not be simpler. Pears grow in these little clusters, right? You want to thin each of those clusters down to just 1. That's it. 1 single pear per cluster. And there's one more piece to the puzzle here, spacing. You want to aim for about 1 pear every 6 to 8 inches along the branch. That gives each one of them plenty of room and plenty of resources to grow to its absolute full potential.
And what you're preventing here is a problem called biennial bearing. That's the fancy term for when a tree completely exhausts itself one year by producing a massive crop, and then has basically no energy to produce anything the next year. It's this boom and bust cycle, and proper, consistent thinning is the only way to break it.
So let's put it all together. Here's your simple annual plan. Early on, when the tree is young, you focus on training those branches to 60 degrees. Every late winter, you do your main structural pruning. Then, about a month after it blooms, you get in there and thin the fruit. And all summer long, you just snip off any of those annoying water sprouts. See, when you break it down, it's totally manageable. So there you have it. That's the complete blueprint for a healthy, super productive pear tree. The only question left is, what's the first thing you're going to do? Are you going to go out and spread a few branches, make a couple of key pruning cuts, or are you going to commit to thinning this year?
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. I hope you're as excited as I am to get out there and start sculpting your pear tree into an absolute fruit-producing masterpiece. If you found this guide helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives. We'll see you next time.
Hello and welcome. Today we are diving deep into the art of growing the most perfect pears you can imagine. We're going to break down the simple but absolutely crucial steps that will take your harvest from just okay to absolutely flawless. So let's get right into it. You know that image you have in your head, right? That gorgeous pear tree just loaded down with juicy, perfect fruit that you grew all by yourself? It's the ultimate gardener's dream.
But let's be real. Getting from that first blossom to a perfect pear isn't always a walk in the park. There are a few key troublemakers, some you can't even see, that are standing between you and that dream harvest. But don't you worry, because we have got the battle plan. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll cover how to protect your tree from the get-go. Then, we're going to go head-to-head with a really nasty disease and some common pests. After that, I'm going to let you in on the one big secret to harvesting. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways.
Okay, first things first, prevention. I mean, it's everything. A strong, healthy tree is always going to be your best line of defense. It's all about making your tree a place where problems just don't want to start.
And here is a tip that might sound a little backward, but it is so important. Please, be careful with the fertilizer. You might feel like you're helping, but drowning your tree in nitrogen creates all this weak, leafy growth that basically just rings the dinner bell for diseases and pests. Seriously, it's one of the easiest mistakes to make.
All right, let's talk about public enemy number one for pear trees, fire blight. This is one nasty bacterial disease that can pop up out of nowhere and just wreck a tree if you don't act, and act fast.
And this right here, this is the classic telltale sign of fire blight. We call it the shepherd's crook. See how the tip of the branch withers, turns black, and just curls right over? If you spot this on your tree, you know exactly what you're dealing with.
So what exactly is it? Well, fire blight is a bacterial infection, and it spreads like, well, wildfire, especially in the warm, wet weather of spring. It gets that name because it literally makes the branches look like they've been torched.
So, your response has to be quick and it has to be methodical. It's a really simple three-step process. 1. Spot those shepherd's crooks. 2. Get in there and prune out all of that infected wood. And 3, and this is critical, disinfect your tools like your harvest depends on it. Because it does. Now this illustrates the most crucial part of pruning for blight. You can't just snip off the black part you see. No. The bacteria has already moved way further down the branch where you can't see it. You have to cut at least 8 to 12 inches below the last bit of damage to make sure you get it all.
And listen, I cannot say this loud enough. If you make one cut on a sick branch and then you move to a healthy branch without cleaning your tool, you've just become the disease's personal chauffeur, spreading it all over your tree. So you disinfect your pruners after every single cut. No exceptions.
Okay, on to our next group of troublemakers, the common pests. I like to think of them in two groups. You got the sapsucker, which weakens the tree from the outside, and then you've got the core invader, which, you guessed it, ruins the fruit from the inside.
So let's look at our two main culprits here. First up is the parasilla. These tiny guys suck the sap right out of the leaves, which really stunts the tree. The best way to handle them is with horticultural oils when the tree is dormant. It basically smothers their eggs before they can even hatch. Then you've got the infamous codling moth. Its larva tunnels right into the center of the pear, ruining it from the inside out. For this pest, you need a more targeted spray, something with spinosad, right after the flower petals fall off.
Okay, so you did it. You protected your tree, you fought off the diseases and pests, and now you have all this beautiful fruit hanging there. You're done, right? Ha! Not quite. The final secret to a perfect pear is, well, it's pretty counterintuitive.
Here it is, the absolute #1 rule of harvesting pears. Do not wait for them to get soft and ripe on the tree. If you do, the inside of that pear breaks down, turning the core all brown and mushy long before the outside ever feels ready. It's a huge letdown.
And that brings us to the secret weapon. You have to pick pears while they're mature, sure, but still totally firm and even a little green. Pears are one of the very few fruits that ripen to perfection off the branch, usually just sitting on your kitchen counter. This, my friends, is the secret to true perfection.
So, let's pull all this great information together. We've covered the absolutely essential strategies you need to defend that tree of yours and guarantee a fantastic harvest. Here is your 4-point checklist for success. Number 1, easy on the nitrogen fertilizer. 2, if you see fire blight, be aggressive, prune deep, and sanitize after every cut. 3, know your pests and target them specifically. And 4, always, always, always pick your pears when they are still green and hard. So now the question for you is, as you're thinking about your own trees, which one of these techniques is going to be the real game changer for you this year? Is it dialing back the fertilizer, or maybe finally getting the upper hand on that codling moth? And that's our guide to getting that perfect pear harvest. We really hope this gives you the confidence and the know-how to get out there and grow some amazing fruit. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. If you found it helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more.